I'm a 29-year-old woman, and the last time I saw my mother in person, she told me no one would ever want someone like me. The words didn't surprise me. They were just the final nail in a coffin she'd been building since I was a child. The house I grew up in looked normal from the outside, 2-story, beige siding, trimmed hedges. Inside, everything felt cold. Not physically, just emotionally. My mother rationed affection like it cost money. Eye contact was rare, compliments were microscopic, and silence filled every room. It wasn't neglect in the obvious way. She never hit me. She just knew exactly where to aim her words to make them feel permanent. When I was 12, a girl at school stopped inviting me to her house, and I cried about it. My mother didn't comfort me. She stood in the doorway and said, "You're difficult. People like you end up alone." Then she walked away. No shouting, no slam doors, just that sentence, surgical and clean. My father was there, technically. He was always around, just never involved. He spent his evenings reading the newspaper or hiding behind his office door. If he ever noticed what was going on, he didn't do anything about it. I had a younger brother, Calvin. He figured out early how to stay on her good side, by agreeing with her, by laughing at her jokes, by keeping his head down. He wasn't cruel. He was careful. And sometimes, careful looks like complicity. My role in the family was too much, too emotional, too smart, too outspoken. I was never the golden child, but not the scapegoat either. Just the exhausting one. Everything I did took up more space than she thought I deserved. She used to say, "You'll thank me when you're older. I'm making you strong." But it wasn't strength she was giving me, it was loneliness. I learned not to need anyone, because needing made you weak. So by the time I turned 15, I stopped asking her for anything. No more approval, no more rides, no more help. Instead, I started teaching myself things. How to cook, how to budget, how to fix a broken drawer, how to sew a ripped hem. YouTube became my best friend. I'd spend hours watching tutorials on how to do things myself, because it was the only way I'd ever have them done. I doubled my classes in high school and managed to graduate a year early. I didn't tell anyone at home until the paperwork came in. I didn't invite anyone to the ceremony either. But she showed up anyway, and when I asked her not to, she smiled in front of everyone and said, "She's just being dramatic." At 17, I moved out. I had $300 saved from working at a frozen yogurt stand, a scholarship that covered part of my tuition, and a roommate I found on a university Facebook group. It wasn't glamorous. We shared a shoebox apartment, and the floor tiles were chipped, but it was mine. The silence there didn't hurt. In college, I worked 3 part-time jobs. On weekends, I folded sweaters at a retail store. On weeknights, I served coffee until midnight. And early mornings, I cleaned offices before classes started. I didn't go out. I didn't party. I didn't tell anyone from back home that I was making the dean's list every semester. It felt like showing her a trophy she never wanted me to win. Holidays were the only time I went back. Calvin would act normal, but my mother always scanned me the second I walked in, not out of love or concern, but like I was a stranger who used to be a burden. One Christmas, I brought her a gift, a hand-knit scarf. She opened it, glanced at it, and asked, "Don't you think this color washes you out?" The last time I saw her was 2 years ago. I was home for Thanksgiving. She asked if I had finally settled down with someone. I told her no. She gave a small nod and said, "Of course not. No one wants someone like you." That sentence didn't feel new. It felt rehearsed, like she had been waiting to say it for years. And in that moment, something clicked. I didn't need to be wanted. I needed to be free. I packed my bag early the next morning and left without saying goodbye. That was the last time I stepped foot in that house. Since then, I've changed my number, moved cities, and built a life that doesn't leave space for people who only love on conditions. I didn't become successful to prove her wrong. I did it because I knew no one was coming to rescue me. And I was tired of standing still, waiting for someone to want me enough to see me. She said I was difficult. Maybe I am. But I'm also self-made, self-owned, and out of reach. And that's exactly how I plan to stay. After college, I graduated top of my class with a double major in mechanical engineering and environmental science. I didn't go to the ceremony. I picked up my degree, packed up my secondhand hatchback, and drove to a small city 3 hours away. Rent was cheaper, and no one knew my name there. I got a job at a renewable energy startup run out of a red brick building next to a bike repair shop. The salary was modest, but it was steady. My first day, I was handed a hard hat and shown a whiteboard with 4 projects mid-crisis. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. I liked that. My boss, Joanna, was the first woman in charge I'd ever worked under. She didn't sugarcoat anything, but she also didn't belittle me. She'd ask questions I didn't know the answers to, then wait patiently while I figured them out. I learned more in 3 months under her than I had in 4 years of school. I didn't make friends at work. Not right away. I stayed late, skipped group lunches, turned down every after-hours hangout. On weekends, I turned my garage into a workshop and taught myself how to rebuild furniture. I bought broken chairs at thrift stores and gave them new legs. I liked taking things that were once useful and making them solid again. 2 years in, I was promoted to project lead. The bonus helped with the down payment on a small 2-bedroom house. It was falling apart, peeling paint, water damage, a cracked driveway, but I saw potential. I spent 6 months ripping out cabinets, replacing wiring, sanding floors, and painting every inch myself. That house became mine in every sense of the word. During drywall week, Calvin messaged me. I hadn't heard from him since college. His message was short. He asked if I'd co-sign a loan. No explanation, no context, no catch-up. I replied that I couldn't help. He responded a day later, "Thought you were family." Then nothing. 3 days later, my phone lit up with a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. The voicemail started with, "I guess you think you're better than us now," and ended with a sigh and silence. I recognized the voice. I blocked the number without saving it. At work, Joanna nominated me for a Regional Women in Tech Spotlight. I hesitated when they asked for a photo and a short bio. I kept it simple: engineer, builder, mentor in progress. When the article went live, it got picked up on a few LinkedIn feeds. A woman I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year of high school messaged me, "You've always been different. I'm glad you didn't let anyone crush that." That message caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the screen for a while. It was the first time someone from my past acknowledged what had happened and saw me as someone who got out, not someone who ran away. A few weeks later, I adopted a rescue dog. Rue was small and nervous, all ribs and matted fur. Training her taught me more about trust than any therapy session ever could. She needed consistency, patience, food on time. I gave her structure, and she gave me loyalty. No conditions. I started setting boundaries like I built furniture, measured, reinforced, permanent. I didn't argue when someone crossed them. I just walked away. I didn't owe anyone a second chance at hurting me. That winter, I built myself a dining table from reclaimed wood. It took 2 weeks. I hosted no dinners on it. I just liked the weight of it in the room. Something I made, not inherited. 3 years passed without a single word from my mother. But sometimes I'd get this feeling, like she was still watching. I'd post a photo of Rue sitting in the sun, or a corner of my garage with a new tool rack, and notice unfamiliar profile views on my public accounts. Nothing obvious, just a shadow that lingered. One night, someone left a 3-star review on a bench I had sold through a local marketplace. No comment, no critique, just the stars. My other reviews were glowing, all 5 stars, all positive. This one stood out. The username was an old childhood nickname of mine, spelled wrong but close enough. I changed all my privacy settings after that. I removed personal details from anything public. I deleted old posts, removed location tags, stopped sharing anything that could trace back to my home. At work, Mallory, the only person I let in a little, asked if I was okay. I told her I was just being careful. She didn't press. She dropped off coffee the next morning anyway. That was the thing about people like her. They didn't need a performance. They just showed up. By spring, the house was finished. Rue had a yard to run in. My workshop had shelves labeled and sorted. My garage was cleaner than my bedroom. I'd started offering restoration classes once a month, free for local women trying to learn trade skills. And still, not a word from Calvin. Not a knock from my mother. But I kept the door locked anyway. I wasn't waiting for closure. I was building something better, something that didn't require it. A month ago, I got a knock on the door from a courier holding a certified envelope. Inside was a letter from an estate lawyer I'd never heard of. My grandfather, my mother's father, had passed. I hadn't seen him since I was 16. When I was little, he was the only adult in my life who made me feel seen. On my 9th birthday, he gave me a pocket knife wrapped in newspaper. My mother hated it, but he pulled me aside and whispered, "You're strong. Never forget it." Then she stopped speaking to him. She said he was a bad influence. I never knew why. According to the lawyer, my grandfather had left me $40,000 in a trust. There was also a letter, one paragraph, written in uneven handwriting. "You remind me of your grandmother. Fierce, quiet, sharp. I wish I'd seen you more, but I always saw you." The rest of the family didn't take it well. The lawyer warned me in advance. My mother, Calvin, and 2 uncles had all tried to contest the will, but my grandfather had made it ironclad. Everything was filed properly. There was nothing they could do. 2 days after the letter arrived, Calvin messaged again. "Hey, just wanted to check on you. Hope you're okay." No mention of the money. No mention of anything specific. I left it unread. That same night, I got a new email in a folder I hadn't touched in years. It was from my mother, 2 pages long. No apology. Just accusations that I had taken advantage of an old man, that I had poisoned him against his own family, that I should be ashamed. I forwarded the email to the estate lawyer and added her to my permanent block list. I made sure the address was still correct so nothing would slip through again. 3 days later, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since middle school. He asked if I'd consider splitting the inheritance, just to keep peace in the family. I replied, there was never peace, only silence. He left the message on read. I took a week off work and drove out of town to a cabin I'd helped renovate the year before through a barter project. I'd done the plumbing and built the kitchen shelves in exchange for 3 future stays. I brought books, food, tools, and my dog Rue. There was no signal, and that was the point. Each morning, I hiked a new trail. In the afternoons, I read by the fire pit or chopped wood to stack by the porch. At night, I made lists, not of goals, but of structures, things I would build, not buy. A second workshop, a mentorship space for girls who needed skills more than sympathy. A home with no forwarding address and no welcome mat for ghosts. When I got back, there was an envelope taped to my front door. Mist, Mom, Muschleinen, Winneblen. No name, no postage. Just my first name, written in shaky script. Inside was a photo of me as a baby. On the back, you were never easy, but you were mine. I didn't freeze. I didn't hesitate. I dropped it in the trash with the rest of the day's junk mail. I installed a camera above the porch the next morning and wired it to my phone. Then I walked the property line with Rue and checked every gate and lock. Nothing was broken, but someone had been there. I replaced the screws on the front deadbolt and backed up my cloud storage. At work, I didn't mention anything. Joanna was on sabbatical and Mallory was juggling 2 projects. I kept my head down and focused on what I could control. That weekend, I went to a local community event to scout volunteers for a new idea, trade skills for teenage girls in transitional housing. I left with 3 names, 1 city grant application, and a donated drill press. On Monday morning, my neighbor across the street knocked on my door. He handed me an envelope and said it had been left in his mailbox by mistake. It wasn't addressed, just sealed with a strip of floral washi tape. I opened it inside, gloves on. Another photo, this time of me at a school recital, age 10. On the back, I always came. You never looked for me. The handwriting was the same. I filed a report with the local police. They said without a threat or property damage, there wasn't much they could do. I gave them the envelope and a copy of the photo anyway. Later that week, I upgraded the doorbell camera to record audio and added motion sensors near the garage. I also left a note on the inside of my front door. This is my house. No one walks in unless invited. The next day, someone tried to follow me from the hardware store. They didn't get far. Rue barked before I even opened the gate. I got their plate number and passed it to the police. They filed it under suspicious activity. I didn't hear from Calvin again. No more messages. No more indirect check-ins. But that didn't mean it was over. It just meant they were regrouping. That's what people like that do. They don't stop. They just try a different door. And I was finally learning how to keep them all locked. 2 weeks after I threw the baby photo in the trash, a man showed up at my workshop pretending to be a delivery driver. He wore jeans and a wrinkled polo shirt, no company logo anywhere. He had a clipboard and a printed invoice, but my name was misspelled, and there was no package. I asked what he was dropping off. He didn't answer, just stood there too long. I told him to leave. As he turned, he said without looking back, "Your mother just wants a chance to talk." I locked the door behind him and called the police to report a trespasser. They filed a report, asked if I had security footage. I didn't, not yet. The next morning, I fixed that. I called a local company and had cameras installed around the house and workshop. Full coverage, no blind spots. The technician showed me how to link them to my phone for real-time alerts. Later that evening, I reviewed the footage from the past week. 2 days before the fake delivery, the same silver car had passed my driveway 3 times in under 15 minutes. I hadn't noticed. Rue had barked once, but I didn't think anything of it. That wouldn't happen again. I added floodlights along the fence line and reinforced the side door locks. I also updated the motion sensors inside the garage and made sure every window was latched before going to bed. Mallory dropped off dinner that night and noticed the new setup. She offered to let me stay at her place for a few days. I appreciated it, but I wasn't leaving my home just because someone else wanted to break into it emotionally. 5 days later, I got a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. A woman introduced herself as a family therapist and said she had been asked to help mediate some communication difficulties. When I searched the number, it led back to a community church 2 towns over, the same one my mother used to volunteer at during her brief charity work phase. I called the number from a different phone. A man answered. I asked for the woman who'd left the voicemail. He said she wasn't available. I told him to remove my number from all records and hung up. 2 days after that, I was called into a meeting at work. The founder of the company had received an anonymous email accusing me of manipulating my grandfather into leaving me money. The email claimed I had exploited an elderly man for personal gain and questioned whether I could be trusted on client projects. My boss had already flagged it as nonsense, but the legal department wanted a record just in case. The email listed personal details that weren't public. My names, dates, even my current address. That was the last straw. That night, I sat down and wrote a cease and desist letter. I listed every address I'd ever known my mother to use: old houses, relatives' places, P.O. boxes. The letter was short, legal in tone, fact-based, and final. I had my lawyer review it, then sent out copies certified with return receipts. 3 days later, I got a response. It wasn't from her. It was from Calvin. His email was short. "She's trying, you know. She's just old school. You don't have to go nuclear." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer and started the process of filing for a no-contact restraining order. The next morning, the doorbell rang, but no one was there when I checked the feed. A small flower pot had been left on the step, dusty, half-dead ivy, the same kind my mother used to keep in the kitchen window. No note. I threw it in the dumpster and covered it with used paint rags. That night, my phone pinged. The driveway camera caught someone parking across the street and sitting in the car for almost an hour. Engine off. No lights. Just a silhouette. I reported the plate to the police. They made a note but couldn't take action without a direct threat. The following day, a fake profile followed my professional page on a job networking site. No connections, no photo, no activity. But the username included my mother's middle name and the year Calvin graduated high school. I blocked it and locked down the rest of my online accounts. No new friend requests. No messages from unknown senders. No loopholes left open. I added a second lock to the workshop door, the kind that bolts from the inside. By the end of the week, my lawyer confirmed that the restraining order filing had been accepted for review. We had enough: the photos, the letters, the voicemail, the email to my boss. It would go before a judge in 3 weeks. Mallory helped me organize a binder with everything: screenshots, receipts, timestamps, written statements. I didn't include any of my personal thoughts. Just facts. Paper doesn't flinch. On Sunday, I stayed home and painted my back fence charcoal gray. It wasn't about design. It was about visibility. Anyone trying to hide back there would stand out. I haven't heard from my mother since. Not directly. Not yet. But the silence never means safety. It just means she's thinking. And I'm done giving her space to plan. 3 days after my lawyer filed the paperwork for the restraining order, my mother showed up at my workplace. She walked into the lobby holding a gift bag, dressed like she was attending a brunch, floral scarf, pressed jacket, calm face like nothing was out of the ordinary. The receptionist called my office line thinking she was a client. I didn't go down. I called building security instead. By the time they arrived, she was gone. But she had left behind a manila envelope addressed to me in blue ink. The receptionist said she insisted it was just a peace offering and seemed completely relaxed. Inside the envelope were 10 handwritten pages. Most of them were long-winded accusations, calling me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. She talked about sacrifices I never asked for, memories she believed she created, and how I'd rewritten history to make her the villain. Some of it barely made sense. Along with the letter were old photos, me as a toddler, me in a Halloween costume, a blurry shot of a piano recital. She'd written captions on the backs like "You were my world" and I tried everything. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading all of it. I scanned each page into a PDF, filed it under evidence, and sent copies to my lawyer. I reported the incident to Human Resources and asked building management to add her name to the internal watch list. From now on, I'd be alerted if she ever walked through the front door again. The visit, while disturbing, ended up helping my case. My lawyer said in most cases like mine, a judge wants to see a physical pattern of contact. This counted. That Friday, I walked out to my car after work and noticed a spiderweb crack stretching across the windshield. It hadn't been there the day before. The break wasn't caused by debris. It looked like a single blow near the edge of the glass. I filed a police report, but without witnesses or a camera angle showing the impact, they said there was nothing to prove intent. I had a dash cam installed the next day. That weekend, Mallory came by to help me reorganize the garage. We moved a set of shelves I hadn't touched in a while. Behind one of the toolboxes, tucked near the window vent, we found another envelope. This one was dated 3 weeks earlier, meaning it had been slipped inside before the incident at work. It was another letter, more of the same scattered thoughts about fate, motherhood, and coming full circle. She wrote about how she never wanted things to be this way and ended the note with "Please remember who you used to be." I added it to the folder and sealed the vent shut with metal mesh and industrial adhesive. After that, I started backing everything up. Physical folder in a locked cabinet, digital copies on 2 encrypted drives, plus a private cloud link shared only with my lawyer. I timestamped each photo, recorded every conversation with the time and date, and even kept a journal of every time I saw an unfamiliar car parked near the house. My therapist told me during our last session that what I was doing wasn't paranoia. It was an attempt to take control. I wasn't exaggerating danger. I was reclaiming safety. She wasn't wrong. A few days later, I got a text from Calvin. It came from a number I didn't recognize, but he signed it with his name. He wrote, "I heard about the restraining order." Wow. You're really going to make this public? I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I replied once, "It's only public because she refuses to leave me alone." Then I blocked the number and added it to the log. The following morning, a neighbor told me someone had walked up to my porch around 3 a.m. They didn't knock, they just stood there for about 30 seconds and then left. His door camera caught it. He shared the footage, low light, no clear face, but the build looked familiar. Slim frame, small bag slung over one shoulder, just like the one she brought to my office. I handed the video to the police. They added it to the case file. The next evening, I rearranged my bedroom so that my bed no longer faced the window. I added blackout curtains, taped a small flashlight to the headboard, and slid a crowbar under the mattress. At work, I made sure all incoming packages were screened at the front desk. I changed my office passcode. I also asked for a new nameplate, one without my last name on it. Just the first initial and department. The facilities team didn't ask questions. They just made it happen. No one else from my family reached out. No cousins. No aunts. No middlemen. Just the silence I was used to, stretched out a little tighter. But this time, I had documentation. And I wasn't standing still. A week after the window vent letter and the cracked windshield, I got a Facebook message from someone I hadn't spoken to since middle school, Mrs. Goldstein, our old neighbor from the street I grew up on. Her message said, "I saw your mother's tribute to you. I hope things are okay now." Just that. No punctuation. No context. I searched the phrase and found it fast. My mother had made a public Facebook page titled "Letters to My Daughter." It had been active for nearly 6 weeks. Every post was written like an open letter to me, filled with stories about how spirited I'd been, how brokenhearted she was about our distance, and how she prayed daily for the healing of our bond. The posts weren't angry like her emails. They were worse, calm, nostalgic, manipulative. She had uploaded photos of birthday cards I'd made for her when I was 6, spelling errors and all. She posted a scan of a poem I'd written at 8, titled "Why My Mom is Magic," with a caption about how children say the truest things before the world teaches them to lie. She even uploaded screenshots of text messages I'd sent her in high school, out of context, cherry-picked, dressed up with hashtags like "Unbreakable Bond" and "Mother-Daughter Forever." The page had more than 300 followers. Some of them I recognized: the church choir director, 2 of my mother's bridge group friends, an old neighbor whose dog used to bite my shoelaces. Even my high school art teacher had commented on a post. The comments were unbearable. "She'll come back when she matures. You're such a strong woman for continuing to love her through this. Mental health is hard. She's lucky to have you waiting." Dozens like that. Not one person questioned the version of events she was telling. I reported the page for impersonation and defamation. Facebook responded within hours, "Does not violate our community standards." So I made a post of my own. I didn't name her. I didn't direct anyone to her page. I simply wrote, "Some people weaponize nostalgia. Some people curate a fake version of history to gain sympathy. Just because someone has old birthday cards doesn't mean they ever protected the person who wrote them." Then I shared, clearly and briefly, the boundaries I had set and why. I expected maybe 2 comments. Instead, my inbox filled up within an hour. Classmates from high school, coworkers from past jobs, a girl I hadn't spoken to since freshman dorms. Even Calvin's ex-girlfriend messaged me and said, "She used to scare me. You're not crazy. I believe you." The page was gone 4 days later. I don't know if someone at Facebook finally caught on, or if enough people flagged it at once. Either way, it disappeared quietly, no announcement. But she didn't. A week after the takedown, I received a thick manila envelope via courier. Inside was a typed cease and desist letter from her lawyer. It accused me of defamation, emotional abuse, and continued harm to her reputation through vague public posts. My lawyer read it, laughed, and called it legally toothless. He said if they pushed again, we could counter with harassment and digital stalking. I told him to hold for now. I didn't want this escalating into a circus. I just wanted it to stop. So I said nothing publicly. I didn't clap back. I didn't explain further. I just kept working. I finished a set of commissioned furniture pieces and delivered them myself. I hosted 2 more weekend restoration workshops for local women. I helped Mallory's niece with her senior project by showing her how to sand and seal a cedar table. Then I added new locks to my side gate. Not because I was afraid, but because it was my gate, my house, my rules. A reporter from a local women in tech blog reached out, asking if I'd be willing to do a profile about my work. I said yes. Not because I wanted attention, but because this time, the story would be mine. No captions added later, no cards pulled from drawers and repurposed as proof. Just me, standing next to the workshop I built from scratch, with Rue at my feet and the air clear around us. The article ran 2 weeks later. It had one quote from me that I made sure they printed exactly as I gave it. You don't owe anyone access to your healing, just because they gave you life. After that, the noise finally quieted. At least for now. No letters, no drive-bys, no fake accounts or sudden texts. I didn't take it as peace, just a pause. But I kept the folder updated. I still saved everything. Not out of fear, but because this wasn't about being ready for her anymore. It was about being ready for anything. A month after the Facebook tribute page disappeared, I was asked to speak at a local women in tech panel. The event was small, maybe 40 people seated in folding chairs in a community co-working space. But I said yes. I kept it honest. Not dramatic. I spoke about building a life from the ground up. No fallback plan, no backup support, no one cheering from the sidelines. Just structure, work, and boundaries. At the end of the panel, a girl in her early 20s walked up and said, "I didn't know we were allowed to walk away from our mothers." I nodded, handed her one of my workshop flyers, and wrote my email on the back. That sentence sat with me for days. Not because it was sad, because it was true. No one tells you it's an option. A week later, my court date finally came. I wore black slacks and a gray jacket. Nothing flashy. My lawyer walked me through what to expect. Honestly, we weren't sure the restraining order would be approved. There hadn't been a direct physical threat. But we had documentation. The letters, the workplace visit, the manipulated digital presence, and the footage from my porch. The judge read through everything quietly. She asked one question about the workshop cameras and another about the workplace policy around personal security. Then she granted a 3-year no-contact order. It included a mandatory physical distance clause from both my home and my place of employment. My mother didn't attend the hearing. Her lawyer showed up alone. I was told she cried when the judge delivered the ruling. That same night, Calvin messaged me again from a different number. How dare you humiliate her like this in court? I blocked the number without replying and added it to the case log. 2 days later, I submitted a formal sabbatical request at work. It was approved within hours. I packed up Rue, a backpack, and 3 unfinished books and drove 6 hours north to a small cabin on a lake that I'd reserved months earlier. This time, it wasn't about escaping. It was about choosing peace and claiming it. During those 3 months, I sketched blueprints, not for furniture, but for something bigger. I created outlines for a nonprofit I decided to call the Unwanted Project, a mentorship program for girls aging out of foster care or estranged from their families. I didn't want to build another charity that handed out used clothes and textbooks. I wanted to build structure, emotional skill sets, legal guidance, job training, housing workshops, practical things I never had when I left home at 17. I met with social workers from 2 counties, compiled local resource lists, and mapped out a 5-year plan with quarterly growth goals. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just built it, quietly, solidly. When I came back to town, I filed for nonprofit status, leased a tiny office space near the public library, and hosted the first trial workshop with 7 girls referred by a local outreach group. They learned how to fix a sink, assemble a budget, and read a rental contract. 3 weeks later, we held our first full-day event. 23 attendees, 0 no-shows. A local paper picked up the story. They wanted to run a full profile. The reporter asked if I had any childhood photos or family backstory I wanted to include. I said no, not because I was ashamed, because there are some stories that no one else is owed. When the article ran, Joanna, my old boss, showed up at the office with coffee and a check. She had come out of retirement just to help fund the first year of the program. At the ribbon cutting, we stood side by side and said nothing. We just cried. It wasn't grief. It was a different kind of release. The night of the launch, I went home to the cabin and lit the fire pit behind the house. Rue curled up beside me. In the mailbox was a single envelope with no return address. Inside was a plain white card. No decoration, no signature. Just one sentence written in small, slanted handwriting. You really were always going to leave, weren't you? I didn't freeze. I didn't run. I sat down on the bench I built last winter, held the card over the fire, and watched the edges curl. I didn't leave her. I stopped waiting. I stopped standing still hoping to be seen. I chose the version of me that no one ever tried to love, and I built her a home, a path, a name, not to be wanted, to be whole.